And I believe the building had been a contributing building to the district before it was heavily altered. And that's something we should have caught, but we didn't. Fortunately, Oxford now has 2 preservation commissions, the only city in the state with 2 set up this way, one specifically for the square. What should have happened, we should have caught that, we should have contacted that commission, asked for their comments, and then worked it through that way. But we didn't catch it. I want to go on down here because there's some really great 1920 storefronts. I'm trying to kind of keep in mind, the earliest storefronts we see, 1870s and 80s, and how that changed. These buildings on the very end down here are very nice, very intact, at least the one on the very end, circa 1940 commercial buildings. I just want us to look at that storefront and to see what had happened and how it had been preserved, has been preserved, and what a great thing it is. Now this one is close. Now we see the earlier bulkhead, the area under the display window, what was wood is here brick. And this is a nice effect that bricks from the 1920s and 30s often had, that wire brush. You can see instead of being a smooth fire skin, they took a brush essentially and put that effect into it. And it makes a very textile finish to it. It was very much in keeping with a lot of the revivals of the 1920s and 30s when they were building the Cotswold cottages and they wanted this sort of rustic brick look. So you do that and you kind of get that in the brick itself. And then over here, you see the entire thing. I don't think this has been changed at all in 60-something years. And possibly even the awning is very early, if not original. But you see the transom above the storefront, designed to allow for some ventilation. If it operates, I don't think it does, but it gives light into the back. All the glass at the front. The original wooden double leaf entrance, recessed, so you see what's going on even as you enter the building. It's great for window shopping too, as you can imagine, but it's all here. And this is empty now, so I'm a little concerned as to what may happen to this. This is a wonderful, intact, 1940-ish storefront that really ought to be preserved for what it is. And for goodness sake, I hope no one proposes to put a balcony on this. But I have heard such proposals. Let's walk across the street and point out some nice things that are left. Yeah, that is a very good example. Let's back up. Well, this is water getting into it and the brick face falling off. What I suspect is that they either sandblasted it and knocked off the skin and then opened the soft interior to weather and freeze and thaw and it fell out, or possibly they repointed it with mortar that was too hard for the brick. You don't see that so much as you get into the 20th century because brick were more consistent. But in 19th century, the way they made brick, the fire in the kiln was not consistent. Bricks were only hard burned on the outside and the inside was still very soft. And the mortar in these buildings has got to be softer than that. So when a building freezes and thaws, expands and contracts, the mortar gives, not the brick, which is what you want to have happen. You want the mortar to be sacrificial, to come back and repoint as needed, and the brick to remain intact. Because when you start having problems like this, you've lost your brick. That's going to have to be replaced. And it may have been something else, but something is going on, and that's very often the kind of damage you see with sandblasting or too inappropriate mortar that gets in there. There's not the right give, and they just start to erode away. It's a building in my hometown that they sandblasted along the side, and for months there was a little pile of red dust that just collected as the wall just went back to the clay from which it came. So before we cross the street, this is a good way to turn around. Now this is a beautiful building. Look at that parapet with the wonderful brickwork. Bricks set on the side to create that sawtooth effect, and the wonderful panels. You got the little pieces that go above the parapet, the sort of almost a pilaster effect, a crenellation like a castle, very, very elaborate, very fanciful. Then you can see the cast iron pilasters that frame what would have originally been a storefront, which is now all inappropriate. And that's the words we use. It's just not appropriate. We've seen, and I think get an idea of what a storefront is supposed to be. Obviously, this is no longer a dry goods store or whatever it was originally. It's offices, and certainly offices have a different need of the floor space. But you could keep an original storefront like you have here, put in blinds or drapes, partition a few feet in for offices, keep the original storefront, and the great thing about that is when that building changes hands and somebody that doesn't want an insurance office but wants a dress shop, they've got it. They don't have to change anything. If someone wants some other use for that, they're going to have to redo it. So that's something that preservation need to keep in mind. Preservation is usually very economically viable. Usually the most inexpensive thing to do is good preservation. All right, let's walk across and we'll get some closer details.
Star! We have Star!
This is Chickasaw Iron Works too. This is marked in the iron threshold. It's a very substantial pilaster, and then the brickwork was laid right on top of the cast iron, and all of it was just infilled on top of what was there. But I think you can begin to get a feel for how this storefront would have worked historically. And then we have here, even a wooden sided sort of a house front where there should be a commercial front, but there isn't. Even with our plastic screw-in shutters. This building never had shutters, so let's just kind of go beyond that. But I do want to point out the fact, if your house historically had shutters, the purpose for shutters was not to add a splash of color or decoration, but was to be attached by hinges to fold over the glass, to shield the glass from the hot rays of the sun, to allow you to have the window open and get ventilation in case of rain, and to protect it. And they should open back up again. And people in the 19th century closed the shutters and opened them throughout the day to facilitate heating and cooling and protection. So, while I'm not advocating that every shutter should actually move that way, they should at least look like if you folded them over they would fit. Don't think that's too much to ask. But again, this building never had shutters. This is the one I was thinking about. The Chickasaw Iron Works with this wonderful little shield plaque right here on this wonderful pilaster with the rosettes. And then all of the new construction that we talked about a while ago. But you can see still some very nice brickwork. The bricks pulled out like a dental molding and little recessed panels, all that very nice brickwork. And that was done just with simple red brick. And the brickmason was able to make such an interesting pattern. And a lot of people never see that. It's amazing what you can see if you just look up about 10 feet. Or that may be 12, but still. Of course, you shouldn't have trees growing out of your parapet. That's not a good thing. So if you have trees growing out of your building, probably don't want to leave that there.
What are the iron bars?
Ma'am?
What are the
That was probably part of the support mechanism for an awning. It probably had a flat suspended awning at one point, and that was probably how they attached it. Or it may have been a sign, but I would guess an awning. That'd be my guess. And again, we see another wonderful Chickasaw Iron Works plaques right there. Now, I don't remember exactly what happened to this building. I know it was altered somewhat, but it's still kind of as it was, which is a great sort of 1930s storefront. And what's nice about this, instead of just seeing it as you go along the sidewalk, you actually go almost in the store without actually entering it. So you really get a lot more area for display of goods. I know that sounds like we keep hitting the same thing over and over again, but you've got to remember why these buildings were designed and built the way they were. That's the only way they make sense. And these people had shops and they were trying to sell their stuff. They wanted people to come in. There you go. We can see some of this. We talked about the wire brush brick. This has been painted, which is unfortunate. The only time you should ever paint a brick building is if it's been so damaged and so messed up through repair attempts that it just really, that's what you have to do. Or if it's been sandblasted or had some spalling problems with the face falling off and you need paint on it to keep the moisture out. Otherwise, once you paint a brick building, you have created a preservation problem. It wasn't meant to be painted. Now you're going to have to keep the paint up, or if you ever take it off, you're going to have to figure out how to take it off without damaging the building. So bricks should never be painted. They should be gently cleaned with the gentlest means possible. Sandblasting should never be done, because not only you tear up the old bricks, you'll knock out the mortar and you create a situation that's just not good for a brick building. I want to point out the building next to it has the original color. You can see some of the color variation. And it's a very pretty effect, a very nice sort of picturesque again effect on this wire.